What's up, everybody? It's your boy Tru Element 78 in the building with.
Your one and only reigning, defending Mondo Lucha Hall of Famer, the X-Man, Xavier Mustafa.
And I am the natural Chris Black, and I have decided I am not taking responsibility for the beatdown that Devin August has coming. You can thank my two co-hosts for that.
And today is the finale of season 1, episode 5 of WWE's Ruthless Aggression Era series that's on the WWE Network. It is titled Civil War, Raw versus Smackdown. And so we know season 2 is going to be coming in the fall. And so be looking forward to us doing reviews of those episodes when they begin to drop. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell so you're notified whenever we upload new content. Also, leave us a like and leave us a comment. We do read the comments and we will reply to you. So, like I said, this was the series finale or season finale, the last episode in season 1. And they were talking about Raw versus SmackDown. And anybody that remembers Raw versus SmackDown, it's otherwise known as the first brand split. Currently, we are in the middle of a brand split again. But at this time, it was the newfangled ideal that WWE had conquered WCW. The product was getting stale. We kind of talked about this after episode 1 because these were all things that they covered in episode 1. It was almost like deja vu. Like, damn, didn't we kind of watch this? But this episode went much more in depth into the decision behind the brand split. But let me just reiterate the things from episode 1. Things were getting stale in the WWE. They were becoming try-hard, so they created competition within themselves by drafting superstars exclusively to different brands. And then in the midst of all of that, Vince McMahon introduced general managers for each show, which became Paul Heyman on SmackDown and Eric Bischoff on Monday Night Raw. And they went at it for sales, for ticket sales, merchandise sales, ratings, all those different things. There were separate writers for each show. And despite SmackDown being a tape broadcast and Raw being live and Raw being considered by many the A show, SmackDown made a bunch of decisions that in the end made them become the A show and gave each show its own individual feel, with Raw being the entertainment show and SmackDown becoming the wrestling show. So, what did you guys think of this episode, and what did you think about the original brand split?
Well, let me make sure we got something right here. I believe the original two were Eric Bischoff and Stephanie McMahon. Paul Heyman was the head
Yeah, he
writer
was
for
the writer. He was the
SmackDown.
writer, yes.
Brian Gortz was the one for Raw.
Right, I am incorrect. Yes, it was Stephanie and Paul Heyman as a team running SmackDown, and Brian Gertz and Eric Bischoff running Raw.
Gotcha. I got your back, bro. I ain't gonna have you putting out no false information. I got you.
Yeah.
Um. So wait, what was the question? What do we think of the first brand split?
Yeah, what did you think of the original brand split? They showed that The Rock was the first person drafted to Raw, and The Undertaker was the first draft to SmackDown, and they went on from there. And yeah, so just in general, looking back at what you can remember from WWE originally doing the brand split, which they interviewed a bunch of people in this series or in this episode about the original brand split and what their thoughts were. What do you remember from that time about the product and them announcing a brand split?
Well, I remember when they made the announcement for the brand split. I was kind of excited about it, as everybody wanted to know who's going to go where. And then, of course, we had our suspicions where all the big names are going to go. And we always know that Raw always gets the better end of all the deals. Even if it's not now, it's definitely going to be later. But we know how Vince McMahon works. But anyway, I was excited about it. I liked how, they did they walked up to the podium and made the announcements, something that they did not do in this last brand split. That was kind of lame. And I also liked watching the wrestlers' reaction. And I remember watching it back in the day, and be like, I wonder if these are real reactions or are they staged reactions. And then when you realize what really was going down, it's like, oh, that's dirty. But I like it.
I remember when they would first did the brand extension, I thought this is probably a good thing because just like they described on the documentary, there were too many stars on one show, or should I say there was only the same, 5 or 6 guys that they would push in the main event, and focused both Raw and SmackDown on. So you had no growth. You had no development of younger talent to be ready to take the place of the older stars. So by splitting the roster, you were going to get two separate shows so you can be able to build, new stars on each side. Um, I remember the actual brand split, like what do they call it when they were picking? And I don't know. I thought that Raw got the better deal and SmackDown got the short end of the stick. I do remember, or was that another draft where they had like traded basically Triple H, because Triple H went to SmackDown originally, and then like within 24 hours they had traded like the Dudley Boys, or like three people. Basically, they traded three people for
They
Triple H.
traded like 9 people for Triple H. It was like 8 wrestlers, a ring announcer, a bell person. It was like ridiculous.
And they didn't mention that. I'm surprised they brought up the fact that Bischoff just handed the world title to Triple H, which even as a Triple H fan, I did not like. I thought they should have did a tournament or something.
I forgot all about that until I saw that.
I did not like that.
Yeah.
They had it right. They had Brock Lesnar being the traveling champion. And I don't know what possessed them to be like, nope, each brand needs their own champ. They were on the right path. And I still say that to this day. There should be one major title that goes to both sides. But other than that, I love this episode. I'm excited for more to come. I don't know. It was good to relive a lot of those moments that you kind of forget about.
Damn, you wrapping up the podcast episode kind of early, ain't you? You like go home.
You all right, everybody. Well, we'll see you on the next episode.
You acting like referee Herb Dean in the UFC. Hey man, I got somebody waiting in the hotel room. Let's finish this up. Go home.
Hey, get it done.
But yeah, as far as this episode, well, not as far as this episode, but as far as the brand split was concerned for me, this was when I started becoming a lot more involved in understanding the inner workings of what goes on backstage, where around this time was when I discovered the dirt sheets and SmackDown was recorded and all of these different types of things. And I hadn't known that previously. I was just a watcher of the shows. And then a friend started bringing it, hey, I know who won the matches. I'm like, how the hell you know who won the matches? Like on a Wednesday, like how do you know this stuff? But yeah, when they announced the brand split, I was kind of concerned. I didn't really understand how that was going to work between the two shows. I thought that it would be good, that a lot of talent would probably get more TV time than they had been getting, because it had become very tedious. Like you said, you would have a storyline on Raw and then you have to recap it on SmackDown and write more of the story, and you burn through storylines so quick, which looking back, it never, like even going back on the network and you watch things, it doesn't feel like they really burn through storylines as quick as they do today. Mm-hmm. Because today they'll have the same match 9 weeks in a row, whereas back then, and we talk about this all the time, not burning out your talent and overexposing your talent. Talent may be on the show back in those days, but they didn't wrestle every night, especially if they were the champion. The champion might have a tag team match between pay-per-views, but then you didn't actually see them go one-on-one with anyone until the actual pay-per-view. But as far as the brand split was concerned, one of the things that I liked, but I also didn't like about it, was what you mentioned, Chris Black, and that's the champion won belt, and they had to go from show to show. I liked it, but then also at the same time, I'm like, how does that work? How do you write a storyline for someone on each show where they're not involved? Because remember, when they originally did the brand split, it wasn't exclusive pay-per-views yet. They were still being on the same cards. It was like a year or two later is when they started actually doing the exclusive pay-per-views for each brand.
The key to booking one champ would be, while SmackDown has a number one contender vying for the championship, while that's happening on Raw, you're determining who the number one contender is. And that could be interesting, because you could have like 4 guys vying for it, and you have to do something where, their best record within a month or whatever. I just think that it could be interesting. You could still keep people intrigued, because you're always going to be wondering who's next. I'm not talking about Goldberg.
But I also think that, and we see that now with the WWE can't even write for one title that is supposed to bounce between brands, which is the women's tag team titles here in 2020. And it was kind of the same issue that they had back then. So when they introduced the second belt, I thought that it was cool and I thought that it was good. But then it turned out that one belt was still viewed higher than the other. Like, I'm not going to get into all of that, but...
Well, let's be real. That belt was the representation of WCW. Triple H held it and buried every one of the WCW stars. Right. Goldberg, Steiner, all of them.
Yeah, but... Yeah, the original brand split, I thought... Yeah, the original brand split, I thought that was pretty cool. Like, my favorite thing about it was that now I didn't have to watch, I didn't feel like I had to watch SmackDown and Raw, depending on where the person was or the people that I really wanted to see were. Especially back then, as far as SmackDown was concerned, the only person that I was really a fan of that was on SmackDown back then was The Undertaker. And then everybody else was on Raw. Because I wasn't a big Kurt Angle guy back then. Like, I liked Brock, but again, this draft happened in 2004, so he was headed out already. He wasn't there that long for the brand split, and then eventually Kurt Angle came up, and I started watching. I actually remember when I became an avid watcher of SmackDown. I remember I was sick for like a week, and I was just at my cousin's house because they were babysitting me or watching me or whatever, and that was when I really got into SmackDown, because that was when they had Tori and Kane and the X-Pac story angle and the burnt crispy little critter and all of that stuff. But yeah, the original brand split was interesting. One of the things that they did talk about in here was how Paul Heyman made pretty much a power play or a power move in trading essentially the Un-Americans and Chris Jericho over to Raw from SmackDown for Eddie Guerrero, which was pretty much what this entire episode kind of hinged on, was talking about Eddie Guerrero and his ascent due to having a brand, because they can't talk about Chris Benoit. And one of the things that I wanted to address is how WWE, and you kind of see it just in how they unceremoniously sent him out of the company for his last match, even though he wasn't there that long. And we are getting a season 2, but when you talk about the Ruthless Aggression era and this time period, I feel like Kurt Angle was a big part of this as well, and he did not get any roses in any of this first season, which I feel that he should have.
Well, what year did Kurt leave?
2006.
Because he also had a very short run.
2006.
Okay, so it wasn't that short.
He was there 2 years longer than Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar got all the shine. We already talked about all the accomplishments that Kurt Angle did in his first year. He won every belt, plus the King of the Ring, and he didn't get any shine, and he was one of the top SmackDown stars at the time.
Kurt Angle was one of my favorites during this period because of his
machine.
Amount of aggression. I mean, he was ruthless aggression. He was one of those explosive performers.
Yeah, and the main reason I'm bringing that up is we saw the John Cena episode, and he gave John Cena his first shot. He appears all over this, all over season 1, but they're not telling any of the stories of him.
You know, if Kurt Angle wasn't such a good heel and didn't have his demons, he probably could have been like as big a star as John Cena.
And what do you think, Xavier Mustafa? I see that you want to jump in.
I was just going to say what James said, what Chris Black said.
Jesus Christ.
Jim
Cornette would be over there kicking your ass with a tennis racket right now. But yeah, that's one of the concerning things. But anyways, yeah, so this entire episode kind of hinged on Eddie Guerrero, and when you really do look at the landscape of the WWE at that time, if there was never a brand split, I don't think you get an Eddie Guerrero as a champion. You don't get you don't get a Rey Mysterio as a champion.
No, you don't even get a JBL.
Yeah, as I say, you don't even get a JBL. Yeah, which if you don't get a JBL, you don't get John Cena.
You know what though? So Yes and no. I can see probably a lot of those people wouldn't have. They probably would have fought a lot harder to get those chances. But I'm a firm believer that the cream will always rise to the top. And I think somebody like out of all those people we named, I think Eddie Guerrero would have made his way up either way it went.
I don't think they would have. If it was one brand, I don't think they would have given him the platform. He would have just been another good hand.
Yeah, because you got to think that, especially how they talk about on here, you look at Raw and the things they were doing over there, and then you had the entire Evolution who had ascended to the top of the card on Raw. If there was never a brand split, Evolution would have been dominating both Raw and SmackDown. Eddie Guerrero would have been forever stuck in the mid card.
I've always felt like, even to this day, Raw always has this old feel to it, where SmackDown always has this younger, fresher feel to it.
Yeah.
And even when you just said that, like with Evolution, I mean, yeah, you had Randy Orton and Batista, but then you had Ric Flair and Triple H. If you take the age of Ric Flair and Triple H and the age of them two, that's a big, huge gap, you know?
Well, Batista was up there too.
That's true. But I mean, he was double what Ric Flair.
Right.
Or Ric Flair was double what he was.
But no, I get what you're saying. Like SmackDown definitely seemed like the younger show. You had, Edge at the time, Jericho, Kurt Angle, yeah, kind of young.
And you know
John
what?
Cena.
You know what? I felt that. Oh, sorry. I felt that way about WCW. I felt like WCW was a younger show, even though they had some old people on there too. But for me, it was all about the cruiserweights.
Which is why Thunder was created, and then eventually it became a recap show.
Yeah, let's not talk about Thunder.
But
this is a happy podcast.
They did a real quick little mention, and maybe they'll go into it, in a later season. But they did a really quick mention about how Shawn Michaels returned, and we all, the three of us, we love us some Shawn Michaels. How did you feel when he returned? I know I was overjoyed because I thought his career was done.
I'll
let Xavier Mustafa go because I got a shocking statement.
Wait, which return are we talking about now?
Before he came back and him and Triple H had that awesome no holds barred match at SummerSlam. Was it 2002?
It was when he came out of the coffin. This was 2004 as well.
So this is that run. I mean, I enjoyed it. I didn't think it was going to be. I think just like everybody else, I didn't think anybody thought it was going to be much of it. I mean, because we know Shawn Michaels is definitely one of those type of people, just like Bret Hart. You could tell that they don't give two shits about the business when they're in that mode. They sit there with the rusty bitch face, and, and that was Shawn Michaels. But I think that match that he had with Triple H kind of invigorated him. And then he was good to go at that point. And sometimes it's like that in wrestling. Like Chris Black, there's been times where me personally, I'll be so done with the wrestling business. I'll be like, why am I doing this? And then I have an awesome match with somebody, and I'll be like, all right, let's go.
Like, I had pretty much missed Shawn Michaels during his singles run in the 90s because I had stopped watching wrestling due to Jake the Snake Roberts and Damien attacking Macho Man Randy Savage. So I had stopped watching wrestling until 1998. so I missed that era of wrestling. So when Shawn Michaels came back, it wasn't as big of a deal for me, but I became a fan of Shawn Michaels. Like, I knew the name from back in the day. But so yeah, I hadn't known about the back injury and all that different type of stuff. That was all stuff that I learned when he came back. Like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. Like, where he been? Why is this such a big deal? Oh, he lost his smile. He hurt his back. Yada yada yada. I got caught up to speed because also I came in. What got me back into watching wrestling, here's a little sidebar from me, was going by my cousin's house and he watched wrestling, but I wasn't really interested. But he had a little video game known as Warzone, and I knew none of the people on that game except for the Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. I knew none of the characters.
He's like, who the hell is these people?
And so who
the hell are these guys?
And so I had to start watching wrestling so I could know how to kick his ass, which I never was able to actually do. Then I bought WWF Attitude for the PlayStation, and that was when I was full blown back into wrestling. So yeah, that's a little sidebar about me. What was also interesting is how they started talking about how SmackDown did start dominating. They started beating Raw in the ratings and just winning this intra-company war, I guess you could say. And one of the interesting parts was, and I don't know if that was a fan that was basically lambasting Eric Bischoff at a signing, talking about what you gonna do to fix Raw, man, and it sucks. It sucked for the past couple of weeks.
Was that an interviewer? It kind of seemed like, I was like, damn, dude is kind of out of line. Like
He was on Eric Bischoff's ass. But what was interesting is the next clip after that was the same way that they went after WCW was the same way they decided to go after SmackDown. They brought Stone Cold Steve Austin back after walking out of the company 9 months later to have that match with Eric Bischoff, who sold the stunner the worst out of anybody I've ever seen sell the stunner. Everybody talks about Vince McMahon and how he sells the stunner. I think Eric Bischoff had the worst sell of the Stone Cold stunner ever.
Nah, Linda McMahon.
Oh yeah, Linda McMahon. Yeah, she corpsed.
But you know what though? If she'd have went and took it like a woman's wrestler or something like that, then it would have been weird. So I give her credit for taking the crappy. Now Eric Bischoff, who's granted he's not a full-time wrestler, not a fully trained wrestler, he could have did that a little bit better.
Speaking of Bischoff, I know I was shocked when he walked across the stage.
Oh yeah.
What did you guys feel about his turning up on Raw?
That was one of my favorite moments in wrestling.
Yeah, when he introduced Eric Bischoff, that was like the biggest shock.
Yeah.
Like,
because again, WCW got here. I loved it.
Yeah, as far as shocks in WWE, I think it goes Eric Bischoff being introduced as the general manager of Raw. The stuff that's going to be covered by us in a couple of weeks from Dark Side of the Ring, like the actual story of Chris Benoit was shocking, and the streak being broken, and all of us having the same face as that guy in the audience, like, whoa.
Oh my God, that moment, man, to this day still plays in my head.
To this day.
I mean, I just couldn't believe. Like, I was like, wait a minute. I know. I was like Booker T when Eric Bischoff walked past. I know I did not just see that.
I was like, was that 3? That was not 3. That was
somebody finna run. Somebody screwed up somewhere.
Somebody fucked up.
And I want to throw this in there because it goes back to what I was just saying about Kurt Angle earlier. Like, even in this episode, like, they brought up Eddie Guerrero, then they brought up JBL, which JBL's cool. He had his championship run, his single title reign, and he got John Cena over again. Kurt Angle season 2 better have a Kurt Angle part. The thing I found interesting in here, I like that they actually, even though they didn't go in depth, I was shocked that they kind of readdressed the basically racist angle that JBL had with Eddie Guerrero, with the Mexicans washing his car and everything, showing that that's how he got over. Like that was actually one of, like, when JBL first got introduced as the billionaire Texan guy, I was like, what? This is weird. Like, I didn't like it at all. But when he started doing the hunting for Mexicans thing and protecting the border, I was like, this is amazing, yo. Like,
yeah, he did his best work as JBL.
I agree. I hated Justin Hawk Bradshaw or all those other gimmicks he had before then. When he was wasn't he Justin Hawk Bradshaw at one point?
Yes.
Okay, I was like, I know I didn't pull it out of my butt. But yeah, man, the cabinet. I thought the cabinet was a great faction. Man, this JBL was fire, man.
Wasn't Chris Black in the cabinet?
Are great.
Wasn't that you?
No, that wasn't me.
He looked like, he kind of looked.
No, that wasn't.
Orlando Jordan, that wasn't you?
His name was Orlando Jordan.
Yeah, that wasn't you? I thought that was you.
No, that wasn't me.
You came.
I would have did a better job.
You came a couple
Chris
years
Black
later.
came out the cabinet.
Oh man.
Pun intended. No.
But who at this time would you say is somebody that, like, besides the people that were mainly brought up in this episode, and of course, like I said, they're not gonna. They did everything they could to cut around Chris Benoit, which was also very interesting throughout this whole series. But who is somebody that got over due to the brand split that you would have never saw getting over, besides the Edge and the John Cena and the Bradshaw and the Rey Mysterios of the world?
I think Jericho.
I think Jericho would have got over regardless.
Because I'm trying to think, was this during the time where Jericho became the
Undisputed champion?
Undisputed champion? Yeah.
It was a little bit before because Brock Lesnar held the Undisputed champion at Jericho. Jericho unified the belts in 2009, I think.
So it was later on. It was after that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe it was 2009. But Jericho had already been bubbling. Remember, he came into the company hot, going up against The Rock, and he was having championship.
Wait a minute. There's no way Jericho unified the titles in 2009 because The Rock and Stone Cold wouldn't have been around. He unified those titles after the Invasion angle.
Oh, yeah. I was right. Then I was right what I said at first, because when Brock Lesnar won the belt, he won the Undisputed title.
Yeah, he had it.
So the belts got unified in 2002. Right before they did the brand, and the brand split was in 2004, and Lesnar won his first title in 2003. So that means that the belts got unified in 2002. Yeah, and I think he unified them at King of the Ring, if I'm not mistaken. I can look that up. But so Jericho unified the belts before the brand split. So So he'd already
they brought that world title back after they retired it.
So Jericho
brought it together just to split it up again.
Right.
But
I'm trying to think who else. I mean, hell, who else was there that might have gotten over? I can't think of anyone who got over huge. I mean, like on the Raw side.
I think it helped.
You know,
they didn't really mention it in here, but I think Booker T would have never. I think Booker T would have got cut from the roster, honestly, just because of how they treated WCW guys. I think that Booker T would have probably gotten cut from the roster.
Yeah, he probably would have been cut right after that NWO failure. He probably would have got his walk-in papers after that.
Now, what I'm wondering is in season 2, and that they didn't show this in the preview, and I think they're saying that the Ruthless Aggression era was 2004 to 2008 or something like that. I wonder if they're going to bring ECW, the new ECW, into the fold, or they're just going to let that be its own series.
I think they have to.
I think they're trying to forget that happened.
The zombie.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing that started out so well, and then WWE was WWE, and you know how that goes.
I'm trying to think what else. So it's funny how, like, they got to put the title on John Cena. Like, Guerrero beat Brock Lesnar, and I still, to this day, I remember how shocked I was when Guerrero got the 1, 2, 3. I'm like, whoa. Like, he beat Lesnar. I did not expect him to beat Brock Lesnar. And then they said they created JBL because he was a perfect foil for Eddie Guerrero. Then JBL had the title for 11 months and put over John Cena at WrestleMania.
He had the longest reign in a decade.
Yeah.
Time. Chris Jericho, I did look it up. They didn't waste any time unifying those belts. He unified the belts at Vengeance 2001.
Vengeance was after Survivor Series?
December.
Yeah.
Yeah, so right before the Royal Rumble.
Damn, so the Invasion ended in Survivor Series.
The Invasion was only like a 3-month angle, bro.
Yeah.
It was like a 4-month angle. And it's funny because you see that they didn't really touch on it too much in here. Like how we mentioned, they didn't touch on Stone Cold Steve Austin becoming a part of it. and all that different type of stuff. Think about how quick that fizzled out, and how many people that got cut. Like,
Oh my god.
like the only people to come out of that was Booker T
So
and Hurricane Helms. But I think, yeah.
another group that was able to shine during this draft was the women's division, and they brought up the match between Trish Stratus and Lita, and I got to saw that horrible spot where she did that suicide dive and like landed on her throat.
Almost died.
Oh, I thought she was dead when I saw that. I'm like, oh, she's dead.
Who had the worst landing on their head moment? Brock Lesnar or Lita?
Lita. If Brock with all that mass, if he would have landed like Lita, he would have died. Not to this day, I don't see how Lita survived that. But yeah, like the women were given a chance to kind of shine. Although, well, I guess that's going into next season. They turned them more into divas instead of just when the women started really picking up their game, they made them take a couple steps back.
Because they had to do the divas. Because they had to do the divas search. And Tough Enough. And all these things that we're going to get into for season 2.
Yeah, I can't wait to the Tough Enough episode because that was something else.
Did either one? Oh no, you guys weren't in the industry yet. I was gonna say well, no, Tough Enough had like 4 or 5 seasons. Did either one of you guys ever send in anything for Tough Enough?
No, because we were told that they weren't taking indie guys like Ken Anderson and ODB. They were a couple at the time. They had both put in their videos, and they were like, "No, we're not taking anybody who's already part of the indies."
Oh, they just wanted professional athletes and models.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But that's how they got on their radar.
And the Miz.
Lord.
That's gonna be an interesting episode.
I remember the line that Triple H, and they showed it from the clip where Triple H told him either you want it or you don't, and if you don't waste our fucking time. And that stuck with me. Whenever I felt like during training, like I don't know if this is worth it. It's just like either you want it or you don't. If you don't, fucking leave.
So what would you say the takeaway of season 1 would be for you as far as the Ruthless Aggression era?
It kind of reminded me, and I know we've had conversation before, the three of us, but it kind of reminded me that the Attitude Era is not really, I mean, it's revisionist history, looking through rose-colored glasses or whatever. People like to think the Attitude Era was the best one. I have to disagree. I think after studying and looking at some of the matches from the Ruthless Aggression era, that was the better era. They had much better wrestling, much better athletes, much better action. They didn't push the same 6 people. It was interesting. Like you said, the storylines, you seemed invested in the storylines. They didn't rush through them. There was no hot potato with the title like it was during the Attitude Era. It was a great era. I think hands down it beats the Attitude Era. And I like this series because you get to relive a lot of really important moments.
One thing you can say about the Attitude Era versus this Ruthless Aggression era is when you look at it, it was the Attitude Era was kind of trash from a wrestling standpoint. I mean, from a character standpoint, it was one of the best. But I think this is where it started to shift where, yeah, it was still about characters, but then it started to become more about the wrestling. And so you had your Eddie Guerreros, your Chris Benoits, your Kurt Angles, and all those guys start to shine. But you still needed those characters like your JBLs, your I'm trying to think who was a big character back then, the Un-Americans, those guys. And then nowadays is where it's okay. For the most part, it's about 85% wrestling, 15% character. but I think they need to up it more on the character side
Hmm?
because that's what's lacking right now. Is we don't have the characters. Yeah, you got to get that balance. But Attitude Era definitely more character based. Ruthless Aggression Era a little bit more wrestling based, but still a lot of character based. And then now it's like mostly wrestling. Needs to have some more character base.
My takeaways from this series has been that for some reason WWE nowadays is unable to do what they were able to do back then, which is pivot and change their plans if something isn't working and take their lumps as they come along. Like they were showing clips from the old show WWE used to have called Bite This, which was basically like a talking smack or WWE backstage, what those shows are supposed to be, where they would put Vince McMahon on a hot seat and actually be like, why are the ratings down for this? And why has this show been sucking? And you can see Vince at first, he's like, has it really been sucking or is it really bad? And then he pivots and he's like, yeah, actually, you know what? It is bad. And we could be doing a better job or whatever. And then they made the actual adjustments. And of course, it's revisionist history a little bit on where they may insert those pictures, but we lived through it, and you could just see like, okay, John Cena wasn't working and getting over as the prototype or whatever, and so they pivoted and he became the rapper. Booker T wasn't getting over because they had trained everybody to hate WCW guys, and then he got booed out of the building with Buff Bagwell, and then they gave him a character and put him in there with Stone Cold, and then they gave him a gimmick that most people would have killed their careers or at least made them annoying, which we're seeing with King Corbin and King Booker, and he got that over.
Oh, that was another great time in wrestling.
Especially when what's his name, the hood dudes, they pickpocketed him.
Oh, Crime Time.
Yes.
He totally broke character. His character broke character.
Man, they could have went way farther with the Booker T, King Booker character. Way farther.
Yeah, and also you see a company that wasn't afraid to, as Xavier Mustafa said, entertain and give good wrestling and have and pretty much strike a balance, and not only strike that balance across the board, they gave people options. If you watched wrestling for the entertainment, you watched Raw. If you wanted to see good wrestling and athletic competition, you watched SmackDown. And so people have more choice and more variety. And like you said, nowadays it's like 85% wrestling and 15% character, and they need to figure out a way to get back to that balance. You can kind of see that it seems like that what they were going for here in 2020 when this most previous brand split, where it seemed like a lot of the big guys and the entertainment guys are on Raw, and then they put the wrestlers on SmackDown, but for some reason it just isn't connecting because they're not giving them anything to work with. They don't have somebody who's a great foil for somebody else because nobody has a character as much as, and I just brought him up, King Corbin. If you look at the current product on SmackDown, he's the only person with a character actually. And
he just murdered somebody on live TV.
Yeah, but yeah, he's the only one with a character. Daniel Bryan had a character as the tree hugger and different things like
great.
that. But then it just got dropped out of nowhere, like no explanation. He just became a face again.
Yeah.
He lost the title, now he eats meat.
The difference is now is that you said there's too much repetition. They cut storylines short. They make storylines go too long. It's just a mess right now.
And it's too many rematches.
They're not developing new stars.
And
did we ever get the payoff from Rusev and Bobby Lashley?
Nope. But
so that was like a year of nonsense.
The whole Bobby Lashley Lana, that's pretty much been forgotten.
Right. But yeah, just sticking with this series and this episode, like I said, you saw you see a company in the Ruthless Aggression era, and it carried over from the Attitude Era of a company that's like, look, we got to figure out something because what we're doing isn't working. Let's pivot. Let's call out our talent and say who the hell wants to grab the brass ring, and they were able to create new stars. And here would be the question for you guys, because, well, I'll answer it as well. But we just said the Attitude Era, for the most part, people look at it through rose-tinted glasses on how great it was. And I'm right there with you guys that I feel like the Ruthless Aggression Era is the better era in wrestling. But would you say that stars were created in the Ruthless Aggression Era, more stars were created in the Ruthless Aggression Era or in the Attitude Era? And you really got to think about that, because there are people who carried over, and so you can't count the Triple H's, you can't count the Undertakers, the Stone Colds, the Rocks.
I would say the Attitude Era, because when you think about all the people, that bring it back now to try to help with ratings are all people from the Attitude Era. You know, because you got to think about, I mean, if you think about just the ladies, you can think about 5 of them already: Lita, Trish, Michelle McCool, all of them. Then you got the guys. You got your Undertaker. Well, the Undertaker was probably before the Attitude Era, technically. But maybe he became.
He was the new generation, bro. He was even before the new generation, actually.
Yeah, but I mean, but then we got the biker gimmick was the Ruthless Aggression Era. Okay, never mind. Forget the Undertaker. Let's see. Then you got The Rock. You got Stone Cold. You got Goldust. You got
definitely the Attitude Era.
Bob Holly.
Definitely the Attitude Era had the bigger stars. I don't know about the most new stars, because most of the guys that got over during the Attitude Era, they were already kind of established. They just got over more so. Except for, like, I don't know, Stone Cold and The Rock, that's different.
All right. Another thing, and I brought this up when we did the Evolution review, is I like that WWE, that this is all still before the Performance Center. I think that the Performance Center has been a blessing and a curse for the WWE, because when WWE was still pulling people from the indies, and maybe it's a credit to OVW and Jim Cornette and his team down there as well, working with the guys, that they were bringing people together who hadn't all been trained by the same people and had the same style of wrestling. So shit looked better. Like, It was a lot more strong style. Like, people actually laying their shit in, whereas nowadays everybody handles each other with kid gloves.
Like, dude, NXT would not be NXT if they didn't start bringing in independent talent. Just saying.
Yeah.
It was funny. I was actually just listening to Jim Cornette's podcast from this prior week, and he was actually talking about OVW and how they created stars, and how, Jim Cornette and Danny Davis, they had their ways where they could get people trained, and they would train them on their way to do the business, but they'll also show them the quote unquote WWE way, and how they put so many stars out of there, and WWE pretty much at the end of the day cut them out of it, and then started the Performance Center.
Well, they started FCW.
But the goal was to get to the Performance Center. And it was kind of a bunch of bullshit, and it was funny because it was people like John Cena and stuff like that. They kind of stood up like, these are the guys that train us. You can't do them like that.
Yeah. So overall, I enjoyed this series so far. Looking forward to season 2. Like I said, Kurt Angle deserves his own episode. That can't even be disputed.
Yep.
I feel like they still hold a grudge for him for leaving at his peak, but they gave Brock Lesnar his own episode, so I don't know.
But I'll get into that when we talk about that, if they bring up Kurt Angle. That's a whole different conversation.
All right. Who else is deserving of their own episode, do you feel, from the Ruthless Aggression era?
JBL.
Does he really deserve his own episode?
Yes.
Yeah. They should go over like why he was such a good heel champion for those 11 months and why they chose him. You know,
I feel Edge deserves a little bit more than maybe JBL.
definitely Edge definitely deserves his own.
Because
Yep.
because again, this episode, the series is kind of doing a little bit of revisionist history because people were over and they did have some good storylines, but this was also kind of a down period for WWE as well, and Edge kind of carried this company on his back.
When did Undertaker become the American Badass?
2005.
They need to have that transition.
Judgment.
They need to describe that. The Undertaker needs his own episode purely on the badass, American Badass
I
character.
think Eddie Guerrero needs his own.
Well, this was kind of Eddie Guerrero's. You can kind of count this as Eddie Guerrero's episode.
You can do more with Eddie Guerrero.
But also the Eddie Guerrero and JBL would be a hand-in-hand episode because it would have to cover JBL. It would have to cover the creation of JBL and then him creating the Eddie Guerrero and then creating John Cena.
I think Rey Mysterio needs his own episode. No.
Would he technically be Attitude Era?
No, because he didn't really get a time to really shine.
He was shining in WCW though.
But did he?
Yeah, he was one of the top cruiserweights there.
I don't know. I remember that young faced boy. I don't know if that was Rey Mysterio Jr. or not.
I mean, he was getting darted into trailers.
I think he deserves this because it was during that period he became heavyweight champ, and even as unbelievable as that was, he was amazing back then as a worker.
Oh wow, I am tripping. I was completely wrong about the American Badass character. I remember it was Judgment Day, but it was Judgment Day 2000.
Okay. So it's just before.
Yeah, Ruthless Aggression. He became Big Evil in Ruthless Aggression because in 2003 is when he dumped the entire like biker gimmick and went back to.
I mean, I still think that character deserves his own episode because it was such a change from the traditional Undertaker.
Yeah, probably. I would like for them to cover the actual invasion angle a little bit more, but I it seems like season 2 is going to be a bunch of things that didn't work for the company. So maybe
that will be the episode. Like they can bring up Goldberg and Steiner, and they can have their own shit episode.
Yeah, because like I said, you really look at the invasion angle. The only one to come out of that angle was Booker T. Like everyone else was gone.
Rob Van Dam.
But that was when they brought in ECW, just from the pure WCW invasion, without ECW and Rhino and all of them, because if you want to bring that in, and you got Rob Van Dam, you got Rhino, that's pretty much it.
Dudley Boys.
Oh yeah, well the Dudley Boys had already came over. Remember, they were already in WWE, and then they joined up.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, the Dudley Boys. Dudley Boys leaving ECW was part of the reason ECW went under too. Like they lost all their stars. They lost Taz. They lost the Dudley Boys. Like it was just an exodus. But that's a whole nother story. I was a big ass ECW fan back then. I used to stay up every night to watch ECW and Saturday Night Shotgun.
And then you watch some Skinamax.
Yep. Yeah, all of that. I can tell y'all about Real Sex 19, baby.
Taxi Cab Confessions.
That wasn't no damn porn. But anything else from you guys?
No.
That's all I got. I'm ready to cover. It's the dark side of the ring.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So, yep, that's going to be the next thing that we end up covering. It's going to be the dark side of the ring. So, they're going to be talking about the Chris Benoit tragedy, which also covers the Eddie Guerrero tragedy. They're going to be talking about New Jack. We're going to be talking about a bunch of Owen Hart, like this next season of
Dino Bravo.
Yeah, this next season of Dark Side of the Ring is going to be a real heavy season of Dark Side of the Ring, but it's also
Road Warriors.
But it's also going to be a lot of things that are from our era and that we're going to be very familiar with. So I think this is going to be a really good season and open our eyes probably to things that we didn't know. So, yeah, so we look forward to reviewing that. So, like I said at the top of the show, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, ring that bell so you're notified whenever we upload new episodes, and leave us a like, leave us a comment, and we look forward to bringing that to you guys. Go ahead and give out your social medias, fellas.
You can catch us. You can catch me at Xavier Mustafa on Facebook and on Twitter.
You can catch me at The Natural Chris Black on Facebook and Instagram, and at _natural_CB on Twitter.
And you can find me at Slamcaster TE78 over on Twitter. And you can find us wherever you get your podcast from by typing in Saturday Night Slamcasters or hashtag Come Get Slam. That should also bring us up. Also, there's going to be a link down in the description. Be sure to join our Discord server. It is free $99. How much is it, Chris Black?
$3.99.
It's free $99. So be sure to sign up for that so you can join in on live discussions with us. We'll be doing special series where we're going to be doing watch-alongs of classic wrestling matches, pay-per-views, movies, all different types of things over there. You can also jump into our different chat areas and type messages and leave messages for people to read and comment on shows. It's basically our own personal Twitter and also our own personal voice chat over there. So be sure to click that link, join our Discord server. We look forward to speaking with you guys and interacting with you guys over there. Other than that, holla at your boys. Come get slammed. We up out of here. Peace.